So if you've ever been to Arizona during the spring, it's beautiful. I mean, you would hate it here. Don't come down. Stay in Chicago or Cleveland or wherever you are in the Midwest. But it's gorgeous. So sometimes we take our kids down to Tempe and we hike a mountain. It's just kind of a little peak. First half of it's asphalt. All the kids can make it up. If they can't, we can carry them. But on the way down a couple weeks ago, we were a little later getting there than we hoped to, which is not unusual for us. And so we decided to let the kids walk around for a while. There was this really cool open market, art museum and gallery, and there were vendors all over the streets. So we thought we'd check it out. We got our kids some treats, and we're coming out of a store, and my wife, as she's wont to do, is talking to this 70-plus-year-old woman, and they're just having a great time, and they're kind of doing like the double politician handhold thing, and it was cute. And I heard the lady say, "Oh, it's so sweet. It's so great that you're having kids." And I thought, it's almost like saying, "It's so great you're wearing pants." Like that's kind of what we do. I mean, that's normal, right? Isn't it? And I didn't think much of it at the time, but about an hour or so later, when we're winding down, it's getting hotter and we're getting ready to leave. We're at one of the vendor trucks. I think I'm getting Indian fry bread, and I turn around and she's getting a Hawaiian Matsumoto smoothie or whatever. And another old lady, 70-plus-year-old, Q-tip, smiling, grinning. My wife loves talking to old people. She could do it all day. And I kind of walk over and I hear her saying the exact same thing. Like, just so wonderful that you're having all these kids. It's such a great family. And then she says, "Thank you for doing your part." Like, what is going on? I mean, I know this art gallery is not really our jam. We're kind of doing more of the Saturday soccer mom and minivan thing right now, but I thought this is really weird. And as I was kind of still letting it marinate, they walked away, we exchanged pleasantries, and that's when they joined up with the rest of their group. Two younger couples, older than us, but young compared to them. And whether they were both kids or siblings or nieces and nephews, I don't know. I just remember that they looked like they were both over 40. They were couples, and they were walking dogs, 2.2 on average per. I didn't count exactly, but between 4 and 6. And I thought, Eureka, there it is. This grandma is thinking about how wonderful it would be to have grandkids of her own or something besides grand dogs. She's traipsing around with the stroller and a couple leashes while her kids pretend that being a dog parent is a real thing. And no offense to you guys who love your dogs, but it ain't the same thing. And grandma's dying a slow death because of you. So the reason I bring it up is Fox News. The reason I bring it up is there was an op-ed recently. It's called "Here's Why It Matters That Americans Are Having Fewer Children Than Ever Before." And while we think about this often because we're getting ready to welcome our 5th kid in the family, I think a lot about the person that I was when I was single, the priorities that I had, the value system that I embraced, and how I've kind of changed and been molded, and my priorities have shifted since that time. And really, in terms of being a human, I think I'm better in every way, especially because of my wife, than I was then. And that's a necessary part of bringing kids into the world and raising them and looking out for their well-being. So I think about that as I read this article, and I feel bad for that grandma and for people who don't know the joy that we've had in our lives. And what can you do other than say, look, well, let me read this. I'll get back to the lecture later. This is sad. I learned a couple of things in this article I want to share with you. First off, author says, last year, women in the U.S. had children at the lowest rate ever recorded, ever. There were just 60.2 births for every 1,000 girls and women ages 15 to 44 in our country. 15 is a little low, but okay. As a result, there were fewer births in America last year at 3.85 million babies than at any time since 1987. Think about that. That's one generation. In my lifetime, we have less babies being born than we did in 1987. I think that's the year Space Camp came out, or one of the Back to the Future movies. It's a 2% drop from 2016, but overall, in the long run, that's a horrendous figure. It gets worse. The income levels kind of back up a lot of the stereotypes about people who have a lot of kids. It says, in addition, those having the most children are least able to pay for their upbringing. The birth rate was almost 50% higher for those with less than $10,000 in family income than for those with family incomes of $200,000 or more. Now, I admit I read this a couple times because less than $10,000 in income, that's a totally different league. But it's 50% higher in that category than those who had family incomes over $200,000 or more. People who have money are not spending it on kids. Kids are expensive. Trust me, I know. Author continues, the lack of commitment of middle-class and wealthy Americans to having and parenting their own children goes hand in hand with our elite's casual approach to other issues. I was going to go towards dog parenting, but he says mass immigration. Now, this isn't the direction I would have automatically thought of, but it does bring to mind some popular maxims about I don't know, immigrants being willing to do the jobs that Americans won't do. In this case, having, raising, and preparing the next generation of America to keep society afloat. It's kind of a big deal. Author says, while I would be the last person to insist that large families like ours, he pointed out that he had 5 kids, be the American model. Time out. I would. It's better. I would. I'll get to the reasons why in a little bit. Let me make the case here, or I'll have him do it. He says, no matter where on earth a person lives, parenthood is a lifelong investment. True story. The willingness to make the investment is a critical indicator and determinant of a person's political viewpoint. Now, here's some things that I hadn't really thought about too much going into this. We always hear about the different states being laboratories, right? That's the way the founders designed it. And so now the arguments are, which state has the most people fleeing, like New York and California? Which state has the best economy? Which state is the most prosperous? Which state has the lowest taxes, best education, highest welfare numbers, right? And you always hear about red states and blue states. This is one I don't ever hear. In the U.S., parents with more children are embracing a more traditional lifestyle, shocker, and also are more likely to vote Republican. Also not a shock. In the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump won all 10 of the states with the highest fertility rates provided by the CDC, as well as 16 of 17 states with the highest fertility rates. The bottom 10 states in fertility were all carried, no pun, by Hillary Rodham Clinton. What can we glean from that? What does that tell us? That is nuts. 16 of the 17 states who have the most kids did not vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, why would that be? What does that tell us about the values and priorities of those people, what they really care about? I said earlier, having kids has made me a much less selfish person. It's really focused my attention on things outside of my immediate sphere, which is why I wouldn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, all right, I'm going to expand on this a little bit. In terms of, let me point out a couple ironies, a couple things that I notice. Number one, when you're involved in politics, when you're watching the news, when you're having chats with your friends, how often when something big is going on, do you hear about the children? Private education is too big of a risk. We have to think about the children. Gun control, too important. We need to think about the children. X party wants the children to get murdered in the street. X president's a Nazi and he hates children all the time. So isn't it ironic or enlightening to learn that the ideological group, the progressives, the Democrats, whatever you want to call them, the people that support Hillary Clinton by state are the least likely to have kids. They care so much about children that they don't even want them. Or better yet, if they accidentally or intentionally get pregnant, what do? Well, one of their most important platform issues and thing that they've gotten government to bilk $500 million a year from the taxpayers to do, abort them, either through dilation extraction or potassium chloride, which also known as chemical incineration. But that's a content for another video. By the way, if you're into that, you should definitely listen to my podcast with Ann McElhenney about Kermit Gosnell, as well as my interview with Lila Rose. There's some really good stuff. I'll link to it below. So that's the one piece of irony there, is that pro-choice means no children. They choose not to have them, or they choose to exterminate them if they have a near miss. That's what pro-choice means. And those people vote for Hillary Clinton by state. They're not having kids. Irony number two. I've always thought it odd that when you're having a political discussion or you're trolling online on YouTube, as I want to do, the last ditch effort to protect an untenable position is this of being advocates for science or attaching yourself to the evolutionary cause. Now think about how interesting this is. If you're in one of those 10 states, chances are, based on ideological beliefs alone, it's one of the states where it is more popular to promote the idea that people who can't procreate should be getting married. Leave all the bias and hatred and religious bigotry aside. That is a de-evolutionary position. If you want to evolve as a species, you can't stick people together that don't procreate. Just saying. That's a fact. Number two, if you are teaching people to nuke their sexual organs and reassign their gender based on how they feel instead of what they are, also de-evolutionary position. It's not good for the human gene pool. Number three, and this is obviously the most simple, is that if you believe in evolution, or the modern iteration of evolution, which is only as old as Darwin, right? It replaced the evolutionary theory right behind it. Then the last thing you want to do to prove that you're a believer in that, or to practice what you preach, is to take your genes out of the selection pool, which is what the top 10 states that voted for Hillary Clinton are doing. They're not reproducing. So Those concerns ring a little hollow for me, as do the ones about caring for the children, because they don't have them in as high numbers. They're not having them. They're choosing not to have them. That's choice. The third irony, I'm going to get a little religious here for a second, because all sin is rooted in rebellion. Think about it. What was the very first commandment that we have recorded, that's recorded in our history in the Bible? Whether you believe that was 6,000 years ago, 6 million years ago, 6 time periods ago, it was multiply and replenish the earth. This is what's not happening, which is not surprising to me. I think abortion is a grievous, heinous sin, right? I think redefining marriage is sinful, and it doesn't help the human species. I believe that not doing this is rooted in rebellion. So think about some of the reasons we've heard for this. In the 60s and 70s, it was the population bomb, right? It was mass starvation. It was Rachel Carson and Silent Spring. And you can't risk bringing kids into a world if they're going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. You look at the growth and technological advancement and prosperity on planet Earth, it's all garbage. It's deception, pure and simple, delusional deceit. And they bought it wholesale. So you move forward, right? In the 70s and 80s, it's the malaise, and it's climate change, and it's pollution. And now fast forward, and it's the third iteration of feminism. It's, look, ladies, you could do the old thing, which is be barefoot and pregnant, have to sit home with those freaking kids, or you could be out hardening your edges in the workforce. You could be out competing with the men, showing them that you can have it all. You can be anything you want to be. You can be Daisy Riddle, the quintessential ultimate female, like you see in the movies and the media all the time. What did Manu call her? The all incompetent ingenue, right? The woman who can just do anything because you're brave and strong and you just are a woman, period. And what is this doing? That's sending women out to strive to be CEOs and getting advanced degrees and working longer hours and freezing their eggs and putting off having a family until they turn 40, actresses, CEOs, successful women, lawyers, and they turn around and go, this sucks. Like, who cares about any of this? And that's the lie. Just like generations past, the most important, meaningful, impactful way that you can change the world is to leave your permanent stamp on it through your influence on a child. The old maxim is that no tribe knows which womb holds the chief, right? Think about all the LeBron Jameses and the Steve Jobses and the Tim Tebows. I don't know, LeBron probably wasn't going to be an abortion, but Barack Obama, whose dad tried to get his mom to have an abortion, all the unborn geniuses, all the talent and skill and opportunity costs that we don't have because people, especially in the higher income classes, refuse to have kids. Why are they doing it? Aside from being taught that it's undesirable, let's look at some other things here. Continuing on, we don't want to be Europe. Europe sucks. They're retarded. But for all the challenges we face in the US, the problem is far worse in Europe. Shocker. Where the current attitude was summarized in a recent report by Population Europe entitled, "No Kids, No Problem." Here we go. European women of childbearing age had an average of 1.56 children over their lifetimes. Far fewer than the 2.1 necessary to even keep the population stable. The comparable figure for the US is 1.76 per woman. Also not good enough. And both the numbers in the US and Europe would be far worse if not for the higher immigrant fertility. Those are also the poor well, I don't know, by average, probably poor, although Indians and Asians are doing just fine in the United States. The Europeans who are declining to become parents, again, I don't use the word parents because they've redefined that. It's mothers and fathers. Those are parents. If they're not mothers and fathers, if they're mothers and mothers or fathers and fathers, they're just roommates. They're only following the example of their leaders. Of the 6 founding members, check this out, of the European Union, Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, today only one of them, Belgium, is led by someone who has children. How does someone empathize with you and your plight and care about your kid and their schooling, their education, and the way they're brought up and their safety when they can't even relate to what it's like having a child? They've never seen their spouse bring a child into the world scream. They've never held that hope in their hands, Man of Steel, and that connection and that lightning electricity of knowing what it is to bring a human life in and to know that their destiny lies squarely, their fate is in your control. Those are the people that are running Europe. Britain and the European Commission, also headed by childless leaders. Amazingly, these 8 core leaders of modern Europe have a total of 2 children among them. Does Justin Trudeau have kids? I don't know. This same group in 1951 had 32 children. Well, in one generation, they've gone from 32 to 2. What does that say about the priorities, the values, and the virtues of those people? What does it say about their ability to tell you how they're going to shape the policies, procedures, the economy of the country you live in so that it'll best benefit your kids and not kids from some other third world country or some other hostile nation, etc. In both Europe and the US, the decline in motherhood and the increased decline in the number of men accepting the responsibilities of fatherhood, 40% of births in the US and Europe occur out of wedlock, don't even talk about the black community, are indicative of a materialistic, pleasure-seeking, live for today ethos. There it is. What he's saying is part of it's because we are so selfish, we ain't got time for that. We don't care enough about the future of our nation. And by the way, if this is true, if there's a link between being selfish and not caring about the future of the nation and the fertility rate of the states that voted for Hillary Clinton, maybe we should pay attention a little more closely to what that says about those people. Now, he repeats again, while I would be the last person to insist that large families like ours be the American model, I would. It's a better system. If you want to change the world, all you have to do is have a child with the right values, virtues, and abilities, and have them go out there and create that change. We always hear about change, change, change. They want to change laws. They want to change policies. They want to change hearts. You change people. You get people who change things. Over time, that's the only thing that will change anything. In his book, The Disappearance of Childhood, the late cultural critic Neil Postman wrote, "Children are the living messages we send to a time that we will not see." A wise man once said that no success outside the home can compensate for failure inside the home. And the only thing that worse than failing in the home, whether it's being a lousy father, a bad role model, even a drunk, a drug addict, whatever it is opting out, is MG towing and saying, you know what, I'm just going to completely withdraw and do my own thing. So get rid of the dogs, have some kids, raise them right, and subscribe to my channel. See you later.